Drew. Hey, Drew, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm fabulous. We're talking here with, hey, look, author of I Have a Tornado. We're going to talk about this because I'll be honest with you, Drew. The book kind of threw me for a limb. That's a new metaphor. You're welcome to use that in school if you want to.
I call you on it.
But that's because the tornado would pick up limbs and throw them away. The book threw me for a loop, and I'll let you explain the book first, and then I'll explain what the book meant to me, and I'll see if I got it wrong. It's I Have a Tornado, and we're speaking with Drew Beckmeyer. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. So I'm a Tornado is about a tornado who is pretty upset, but he doesn't really know that he's upset or doesn't want to
Okay.
admit that he's upset. And it's kind of his process of meeting a cow and their conversation that sort of illuminates him to how his actions might be affecting others and what his emotions are actually doing.
Okay.
Um,
That's
it's
a
it's a little open to interpretation, but that's kind of the gist of it.
that's a great way to describe it because when I first read the book, I loved the art, and I want to get more into the how you do the art
Mhm.
because that's a little beyond how I can understand it. I thought the entire thing was metaphorical, and that it was about a youth who was out of control and doing all sorts of wacky things that with no regard to people around him. But then I read something from the publisher, and it was more from the tornado's perspective, like a young meteorologist look at a tornado. How do you, I guess
I think
how
it's
do you want
cool.
people to perceive the book?
So when I first had the idea, it unfortunately was not a youth that was spiraling out of control. I wasn't out of control, but it was kind of these conversations where I'd be in a funk or in a bad mood or maybe lashing out in ways that were not nice to the people around me, and then getting called on it and people asking like, "Are you okay? Like, are
Yeah.
you upset?" And me kind of knowing in the back of my head that I was, but not wanting to admit it, kind of that like, no, I'm fine. Everything's fine. Um, so I wanted to write something about not wanting to admit when you're mad and kind
Yeah.
of like being mad kind of feels good and you don't want to like let that feeling go.
Yeah.
And also the idea that sometimes just accepting that you are upset can be the thing that like lets it all like sort of disappear. So I didn't want the tornado to have a reason why he was upset. I just wanted it to be about the process of him um, kind of understanding what was going on with him, that sort of thing. So it is metaphorical. I mean, it's yeah. I think a lot of people have read it as like the tornado is a toddler who's having a tantrum. It's just me. It's just
Yeah. That's okay because anybody who's spent time in an elementary school or a middle school, they've probably seen those signs that say, "It's." I'm paraphrasing here, but it's okay not to feel okay,
yeah,
or
yeah, yeah,
something like that, or it can be phrased many different ways. But I presume it's like that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, you got to learn to like manage what you're actually doing. But yeah, feeling not okay is how most people feel all the time. So yeah.
So the art, the first book I read from yours was actually the one you did the art for, well, Wild Child, Dear Wild Child.
Yeah.
And in my review of that, I said that the art almost looked at the empty space in the page and made the empty space the star, which then brought you back to the space that occupied that. And I said it much more eloquently than that. How do you create things? Because it's got that same kind of vibe, almost like a hungry caterpillar, a 3D layered look.
Yeah.
What's going on there
So
for the art to be created?
like I look when you say hungry caterpillar, I think like Eric Carle, like it's tactile. It's like
Yeah,
you reach out and touch it. Even though he's making shapes and animals and stuff out of that, you know, like you can look at it and be like, okay, he splattered paint and he cut it
yeah,
up. So like with Dear Wild Child, it's all crayon. And I like the idea of like I want to use materials that kids have access to. And I want them to look at it and not be like confused, like about was this digital? How much like trickery is involved here? I want it to be like blatant, like naked, like these are 4 layers of paper. This is crayon on paper, like that sort of thing, and have it be very, very, very transparent in the process. And
yeah.
like that's just kind of one of my if I left to my own devices, if I don't like set up some like ground rules for myself, like it illustrations and stuff can get kind of crazy and too complicated. So that's kind of a way to like kind of ground my work, is to make sure that it's like it looks like a real thing, like it looks like a physical object. So for Tornado, it's all cut paper. I really wanted to like have the shadows over like papers overlapping,
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff, and have it look, like I like kids art. I like it. I teach kids art, and I like it. And I like. I would rather look at a funky kid drawing any day than a perfectly executed illustration. So I try to bring as much of that to my.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned that, because with Tornado, it's got that 3D look about it in some spots. When This is a very naive question, but when you make this, is it literally you making 3D things and then it's just a big overhead shot and the light happens to capture those faint lines?
Yeah, I mean, I pulled out some stuff because I knew we were gonna be talking. I can show you like, so some of it is like the eyes and stuff are put on afterwards. So this is like one of the illustrations. It's just construction paper,
Yeah.
like that I put like a bunch of ink on, and then these strips and stuff. But yeah, they're glued on with a Elmer's glue stick.
Get out.
So it's just different colors of construction paper that's layered on. I could like books over so I can peel it apart if I want, but like it just it's all just stuck on there. Yeah, and then like things that I knew might need to be changed in the editing process of like what emotions the eyes need to be doing. I made a bunch of, I don't have those, but I would just like cut out like a million eyes and all different emotions and then digitally put in the eyes. But even the eyes are still made out of construction paper. But like one of the things that's been challenging for me is that the editing process with being an illustrator, like oftentimes if you work like very, very traditionally, like I do, like not a lot of digital manipulation, when someone asks you to change like one little thing, you have to change everything. Like, because like, for example, in Dear Wild Child, there's an illustration and I think there's a cat in it now, but before it was like a child. And I had done the entire illustration with the child, which was the first kind of edit. And then they came back and like, actually, can you change the cat to a child? And it's like, I had to do the entire thing over again, even though it was just a really small little change. And that's like, a lot of it's just me learning how to set myself up not to have to redo things over and over again.
So with Tornado, it's neat that you said that, because that I'll go into kind of movies in a second. But with Tornado, when you had to tweak certain things on that, I'll call it, for lack of a term, digitally, that were done on the paper, that was easier with Tornado, or was it as frustrating because you had to remove or add elements?
It's easier. I think it's easier just because the look of that book is a lot more simple than how Dear Wild Child was. Dear Wild Child's got a lot of stuff. It's like in a house that's crowded with stuff and tons of trees and things. Tornado is almost like a scrolling video game where it's like they're on one sort of plane the entire time, and the illustrations are pretty basic. So just by nature of that, it was simpler to adjust things. Like about I have all my cows are here. They're on one page. So then they're just cut out like in Photoshop and then just dumped on wherever they need to go.
Nice.
Yeah, so the basics are on one thing.
It kind of reminds me of really good movies that can use CGI effectively when it's not too CGI heavy.
Yeah.
Kind of like a few.
I if I use a computer, I want it to look like even like fake the real. Like there are a couple of spots where like I'd put something in digitally, but it didn't have the right like shadow underneath it, so it didn't look like it was cut out. And then like you have to go back in, and it's a kind of nerdy process of making things look like they all came from the same spot. But
so when you were making the book, do you experiment with different color palettes and say, I know the Tornado is going to have this basic color because it's kicking up dirt and all this stuff, but then as it starts to meet the cow and other things, how did you figure out those colors?
So this is kind of a cool thing. I thought people would notice this, but it's like a rainbow. So it starts with like blue, and then it goes into green, like green, and then so it goes all the way through. So it's kind of just like meant to kind of reflect about the process of like starting and the cyclical nature of the tornado and the cyclical nature of like kind of calming yourself down. So like when he's most mad, he's like yellow and red and orange, and then as he gets calmer, he's pink, and by the end we're like back at blue, like a dark blue again.
Yeah.
So I don't think I'm taking kind of credit for that, but I don't actually think that was my idea. I think that might have been the designer's ideas.
I'll give you credit for it.
Yeah.
Just take the credit and run with it. Have you ever seen a tornado in real life?
No, I haven't. I'm from California.
I've seen a pre-tornado, almost like the precursors of where it could be. And the clouds are just that green, that kind of dirt green. It's fascinating and scary. And you just hope that it doesn't hit.
Yeah, no, I know it's no joke. It's that was kind of one of the things was that people would, who had actual tornado experience would.
Yeah. But back to the kind of the creative process. Have you ever seen Fury Road, Mad Max Fury Road?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That to me is the best example. It's a very side tangent here, but that's got the best example of practical CGI used with special effects
Yeah.
because you don't notice the CGI until you watch the making of.
Okay. And that, but
Just
that's
as
George, what's his name? George,
George Miller.
George Miller. Yeah. I mean, he's amazing at that sort of
Yeah,
stuff.
the way he's done it, the way his whole canon of films. Huge fan. Anyway, that's
Yeah.
little
And all
CG.
of it. What didn't he do? Like Babe, or like he's done like a
He did
crazy.
Babe, not Happy Feet. Yeah, Happy Feet. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. A wild variety of amazing movies.
yeah, because that's what delayed Fury Road is.
Okay.
His Happy Feet 1 and Happy Feet 2 were much more successful, and they should have been. Anyway,
Yeah. No, that he's like a pretty. I didn't realize until like a few years ago that he had done all those other movies too. I thought he had just done the Mad Max stuff, and that was it.
really diverse. Anyway, so back to kids for a second. So we both have something in common in that we both work with a lot of kids on a daily basis. When you work with mid to upper elementary school kids, is that correct?
Yeah.
How do
Yeah.
you
Fourth.
get them engaged in art and to give them the confidence that they can do more than they think they can do? Because they're artistic little creatures, but sometimes making them realize that is challenging.
Yeah, and they learn self-doubt pretty quick. Before I get them, they're
They do.
having to know if they're good or if they're bad at something. So for me, like I try to make it as fun as possible. We do a lot of team stuff, we do challenges, we do building, we try to do a variety of stuff. It's not very traditional art. We might do one painting project a year. And just try to open up kids' eyes to like that art for the last 100 years hasn't really been painting and drawing. It's been about a lot of different stuff. It's been about movie making, it's been about digital stuff, it's been about games. So kind of seeing the whole realm of like what you can do in terms of like design and art and that sort of thing, I find helpful to kind of get through to them. But yeah, and I do struggle like what you're talking about with like the self-doubt thing, because if a kid is especially down on themselves,
Yeah.
it can be very hard to break through that sort of wall. Yeah, they're definitely hard conversation. And on the other side of that, like if it goes too far, then they've completely checked out, and that's hard to kind of bring them back from too.
And even from the I guess the educational side, the more kind of 3 R's or 4 R's, if you were, if you ask like a second grader, hey, can you sing? Can you dance? They'll be like, yeah, sure, and they'll just go out and they'll do their thing. But
Yeah,
by third grade, they start to, no, I can't sing or I can't dance. Like, no, you can go, and
right.
that same mindset kind of festers into all aspects of their education. It's frustrating, but I get that.
Yeah, I feel like the more we can kind of like break down these ideas of what is like good and bad, or like quality and not quality, the better. But it is hard because they come into it like they it's almost interesting because they come in like wanting to be able to create this thing that they've seen before. And if it's not that thing, then it's not good. And
Yeah.
make them understand the thing that's inside their head is like gonna be way cooler than trying to recreate whatever sort of thing they saw on TikTok or whatever.
That's what yeah, I've got some science kids now who we're making a diorama about biomes. And they're
Yeah,
like, no, I want my snake to be like this. And I'm like, no, just make the snake the way you see it in your head, but it's not that. Because
right.
that's, not to be the king of self-doubt, but that's, you can do better, you know?
Yeah, well, that's the other part of it, right? Like the kids that can do better and are not. For
Yeah.
whatever. That's interesting. You mentioned biomes. I was sitting in a science class today where they were talking about like underwater biomes, and they had to come up with their own sea creature, and
Yep.
like that's cool.
We haven't done that yet. It's just the diorama of different biomes with 3 different creatures that live there, as you do. So
Yeah.
education for a second. I am a tornado. It's going to be geared for I'll call them low to mid, maybe even mid upper elementary school kids, even preschool kids.
I think they're doing 4 to 8. That's what it says.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean it's simple. The words are simple. It's I think kind of meant to be like a read aloud book. That sort of thing. The themes I think can, if you wanted to teach the themes to an older kid, I think they would understand it. But I think like entertainment value wise is probably for your 4 to 8.
Yeah. But I call it a read aloud book with a very soft message. You're not telling kids what to do or what not to do, but you're saying, hey, you're going to feel this way. So it's cool and normal. And here's how adults or other people deal with it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm like I despise message books and somehow kind of made one, but I don't know. Like it's I hope it's not I hope the read is not that there's like a strong message here, that it's more of a story that
It is more of a story. It's not preachy, because preachy books,
yeah,
having taught elementary school for a couple of years, especially on the ELA side, kids, even the most endearing book that they'll run across, if it's preachy or too message heavy,
yeah.
they'll glaze out quickly.
Do you use them as like a preachy book as like if there's something going down in the classroom that you need to solve, or you need something to like sometimes
I'm
go ahead. Was my question.
I'm kind of wincing a little bit because I may reference the book and say, hey, I've got this book and it's going to talk about this, but it could be more effective if we just chat about it for a minute. And
Yeah, yeah,
more often than not, it's about fake news or bullying or stuff like that. I'm like, okay,
yeah.
let's talk about what bullying really is. It's not me making fun of you, although not appropriate. It's this,
Right.
kids are interesting. So granted, you're on the art side of elementary school.
Mhm.
How can we get kids to read more? Because you're the author and the illustrator of I'm a Tornado.
Don't you think kids are reading a lot? Like especially like the kids I teach, they're constantly like they walk to class with like books, and it's hard to get them to stop reading. I mean, it's all like kind of fantasy and it's YA stuff, and that's I think
I
a
want
good
them to.
yeah.
I
Oh,
want
the
them to.
figures.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think I think what YA is doing has been it's been huge in the last like 10 years. Like what the
Yeah.
way that it's kind of reignited kids' love of reading and stuff is awesome. And I think they're great gateway books for lots and lots of things. From on my side, like what I do is much more simple than that. So
Yeah.
I try to have, fun stories that are interesting and weird and relatable, and hopefully have like colors and illustrations that are maybe things that kids haven't been seeing too much and aren't
No, it's very engaging for those young kids, like those 4-year-old kids. That's a perfect kind of read to me book. I
yeah,
mean, in addition to the middle school that I teach now, I taught pre-K and kindergarten back in the fall.
yeah,
And this is the kind of book that's going to be, I'll call it a great goodnight book, because it's got the illustrations and the simple text that says, okay, if I need only one book and I've got 7 minutes to read it, I can burn through this pretty quickly. And that's
right,
awesome. Or if I want to stretch it out to 13 or 12 minutes, I could do that and just look at the art and say, hey, what do you see in the illustrations? What's
yeah,
different? Kind of like the message books, but this is a lot softer in that you could say, okay, well, how's the cow feel now? What's the difference in the personality dynamics? I wouldn't use those words, obviously. What's the difference between the personality of the tornado and the cow now? What's changed? And undoubtedly, some child would say, well, the tornado realized that it was being kind of a jerk and not being nice.
right,
So that's why it's a very soft message book, and that's one thing I liked about it. But
yeah,
I did teach some kids the other middle school kids. They were said, "Hey, well, hey, it's annoying because it's Daddy Mojo at school, and I try not to do that." But they're like, "Hey, what's a good book?" And they're in 7th or 8th grade. And I'm like, just do a search for YA Lit or MG Lit on any of the devices, any of the channels you are, and that's how they can find it. Because one of the kids was like, "Hey, the last book I read was Harry Potter, and it was
right.
4 years ago." And I'm like, "Well, that's great, but there are so many other great books that you could read." So just jump in that channel.
Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, I for me the kids that I have are they're voracious readers. They love all that stuff. So that's cool
Did you
that
always want to be an artist and make some books?
I always want to be an artist. I went to art school and have a degree in illustration and stuff. I was doing freelance illustration for a number of years before I started teaching. Kind of burnt myself out and didn't like the lack of structure. So then started teaching to kind of have a place to go every day
Yeah.
and interact with other humans and stuff. And then slowly, as I was teaching, the illustrations sort of started to come back into my life after that.
You said that tornado, and I'm abbreviating. I'm a tornado. You said it kind of came to you because you were feeling flustered and scattered. Is there something kicking around your head now that says, "I see this, and it's a good illustrated book"? How does it come to you? How do those ideas pop into your head?
So like a new idea?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not lacking ideas. Like yeah, it's things come all the time. They usually come to me in like a title. So tornado was at the beginning of it. It was just tornado, and having this idea of something kind of swirling until it stops swirling came to me. So I usually start with a title, and that kind of just sits in my head for a while. And then I'll try to write it out, usually in just like really simple bullet points that are both representative of the words and the illustrations that they might possibly turn into. If it sticks, I'll put together a dummy and show it to my agent and see what she thinks. And she'll either say like cool or not cool, or maybe if you change a few things, then we like kind of work it around and that sort of thing. Yeah. But I've made tons of, for during COVID, I was writing like a story a week and putting on an Instagram, and knowing that it was never going to do anything.
Yeah.
And also like with the freedom of like knowing that I don't have to worry about this selling. I can do whatever I want to do.
You can just
So yeah,
spitball stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, like totally unedited, just stuff for fun. So yeah, I'm not lacking ideas. I might be lacking marketable ideas, but not lacking ideas.
That's commerce is the grease of the wheels, isn't it? Yes. So when you run across a kid in your art class, or any kid in any art class, if they're thinking to themselves, you know what, I want to be an illustrator. They've read X number of young graphic novels. They see your work and they say, "Hey, I can do that in 20 years." What should they do?
Like to make a career out of it?
Yeah.
I mean, like I'd probably be honest with them that there's not a lot of illustrators who just make a career out of illustration, that people do other things. Learning how to be a graphic designer or do something else is a great supplement. But yeah, most of us have a supplementary career. For me, it's teaching. Or actually that's my main thing, I guess, illustration supplementary career. Yeah, but I mean, I think a kid who is, I would think like usually if you're in illustration, you're like probably your skill is like drawing, like good.
Yeah. Cartooning. Yeah.
Yeah. And I would say what I kind of wish I had done is distance myself a little. I already knew I was good at that. But maybe stretch myself a little bit and put myself in situations where I had to do or make art or design that was different than what I was naturally. That would be my advice. And that's hard to get somebody to do. I'm sure people told that to me when I was that age and I just ignored them, because it's so nice to be good at something and have people, tell you you're good at it.
I know I've had that conversation with numerous students where it's like that's cool that you're really good at this and that you say you want to do this, but have a backup plan. Because my parents did the same thing. I was like, I'm going to go into radio. I don't need a backup plan. And of course, then internet radio comes and kills everything.
Right.
So you're like, well, good thing I'm relatively good at public relations and teaching. So there you are.
Yeah. And it's just, I think, makes you like a better person. Like it can kind of, I think if you have like like a dream or something, it can kind of sound like you're ruining somebody's dream and saying like have a backup plan. But it's like when you get older, after you're like 17 or something, it's interesting to know things about other things and other, hobbies and fascinations and stuff. That makes you a well-rounded person, I think.
Makes you well-rounded. Yeah. But yeah, it's tough because when you're older than 20,
then your advice means nothing at that point. Yeah.
I know. It's like any teacher could say that. It's like, no, let's use some hippie phrase from the 60s, but that really would have dated me. Yeah. I tell that to kids all the time, where it's just like, just do some work. I don't know. Lastly, Drew, if you see you're on the illustration side of school, if you see a kid struggling because not struggling, kind of having a bad day, but their scholastic abilities, they're not as good as they could be because they're a clever kid. How could you make them realize or make them think higher things, like I can do better? Is there anything that you could do as an illustrator, as an educator in some aspect of school there?
I think for me, it's like that's about connection for me. Like knowing a kid, knowing how they respond to positive feedback, knowing if that's the way in with them. Like, I think for me, it's like knowing your way in with a kid and what they need to feel confident enough to try. For me, it's like with my kids, when they lose confidence in something, it results in apathy. Like that's their kind of fallback, because then it's like
apathy or destruction. Where it's
Sure,
like,
sure.
if I can't succeed, I'm going to make sure you don't.
Right. Yeah,
That's
yeah.
tough. Yeah.
Either ways of like deflecting like the attention away from like I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing, or I'm not doing a job because I'm not even trying. So if I'm not trying, then it's not my fault that I'm not doing a bad job, that sort of thing. But finding a way to figure out some aspect of whatever project we're working on that will ignite some amount of inspiration or curiosity in them. And that might mean completely changing the project altogether, like kind of really like finding the objective of what is this project really about? Is it really important that this one kid does it exactly how everyone else in the room is doing it? Or is it more important that they find something here that's going to like remind them this is fun and this is worthwhile, that sort of thing, like big picturing it. And then also just knowing the kids